Hello, welcome back to Malicious Compliance Stories. We have another 3 stories for you today. Don't want me to ride on the pavement? Okay. Union overtime. And labor award wins. But before we begin, don't forget to subscribe to our channel if you're new here and turn on notifications so you don't miss a new video every single day. Alright, let's get started. Our first story. Don't want me to ride on the pavement? Okay. This happened many years ago in Europe, where pavements are very common. Also, most, but not all, streets have bike lanes. The law states that only children are allowed to ride their bicycles on the pavement. As a grown-up, you have to use the bike lane, if there is one, or the street, if no bike lane is present. And, of course, you have to ride on the correct side of the street. I was a somewhat lazy teenager. Even though I was using my bicycle every day whenever I needed to go anywhere, I was not very fond of abiding by the rules of the law. I used the pavement, rode the wrong way, even in one-way streets, and so on. But never to annoy or endanger anyone. I was riding my bicycle on the pavement because it was shorter this way. So, this guy is turning around the corner and is suddenly walking towards me. I am still quite far away. Clearly, he didn't like me riding my bike on the pavement. He didn't say anything, but he lifted his arms with which he carried the groceries. Just to look bigger and take more room. Trying to force me to use the street. There would have been enough room for both of us, but he wasn't going to let me pass easily. I get it. I was doing something that isn't allowed. Cue malicious compliance. I hopped off my bicycle and pushed it. Which is totally legal to do. But now I am walking next to my bicycle and all of a sudden there isn't enough room to pass each other easily. He was even more annoyed as he had to sway to walk past me. Our next story. Union overtime. I worked in a factory on the afternoon shift, 3 p.m. to 11 p.m. In another department, there were 2 lazy guys. Their department was pretty much fully staffed, and their job was basically to clean the department, make sure raw materials were available for the next day, that sort of thing. On Fridays, the day shift was often asked to work overtime on Saturdays, starting with the most senior employees and working down the list. These 2 guys were never asked, usually because by the time they arrived for their Friday evening shift, there were enough day shift volunteers to cover what was needed. They discovered that some of the day shift volunteers had less seniority than they did, so they kept their mouths shut, and for months they recorded each Saturday that a less senior employee worked. Then they filed a grievance, stating that they missed out on the overtime because they weren't asked, and should be compensated for all those Saturdays. The company said, okay, and cited a clause in the contract that said they were liable for only 30 calendar days, as it was the employee's responsibility to bring any wage errors to the company in a timely manner. In the past month, there was one Saturday that a less senior employee worked, so they paid each of these guys a day's worth of OT. Then the company transferred these guys back to day shift. They objected to the transfer and lost, as it was ironclad in the contract that the company had the right to assign employees where they were needed. Both had preschool kids, and both had wives that worked days. Dad would watch the kids while mom was at work, then a babysitter or family member would come in and watch them for a couple hours between when dad left for work and mom returned home. Not anymore. They had to arrange day care for the full day at considerable expense. Mom had to leave early to drop off the kids, and dad had to pick them up on the way home. But they did manage to profit from that single day's worth of overtime. TLDR, if you want to force your employer to abide by a contract, make sure you understand the contract. And our last story. Labor award wins. I am a teledata electrician in the IBEW and, a few years ago, was working on a very big job in a hospital replacing and upgrading the data and phone system. We had about 20 people working on the project. A bit of a way through the job, we started to fall behind schedule. The VP of our company came down and announced that we would be working overtime. Working 5 10-hour days. The way our overtime usually works per our union contract is that anything after 8 hours is considered overtime. Well, the VP said that they had worked it out with our union and that our schedule would be 4 10-hour days and Friday would be overtime. Cue malicious compliance. Maybe it was the dubious schedule change or just the way the VP had sort of just come down and shoved it down our throats, but no one really left that meeting with a good taste in their mouths. In our union, overtime is not required. It is purely voluntary. Without any pre-planning, everyone just treated Friday work as purely voluntary. It was chaos. People were leaving at various times throughout the day. Some people would work a few hours in the morning and then leave. Some would leave at lunch. In the morning, we would have 20 people, And when we all met back up at the end of the day, there would only be something like 6 or 7. This was a certified payroll job, so the foreman would need to submit the hours for the job early on Friday, and they had to be correct. More chaos would ensue as he tried to figure out who left when at the end of the day. Then scrambled to resubmit the hours. Needless to say, the hours changed back about 3 weeks later. Well, that's all for this video. Thank you for tuning in, and I'll see you all in the next one.